Guys, how's it going? This is Stoof. Welcome back. All right, we're going to try this again. I just tried streaming for like 4 minutes and it wasn't loading on my computer to watch the chat, so then I got confused and I thought maybe it's not really streaming even though it showed people were watching. And Lynn, I did see your comment. I saw that you were watching, so now I know that that's working, but we're going to try this again, and I wanted to get that all cleared up before I started painting. So now we can start painting. Yeah, it's still not showing on my computer. I don't know. Something's wrong with my computer. Okay, but let's go over this again. So acrylic paint colors today, we have our Liquitex soft-bodied paints. I will leave these colors in the description below this video after the stream is done. But the colors today, we have black, titanium white, flesh tint, phthalo blue, burnt umber, phthalo green, light blue violet, ultramarine blue, bright aqua green, cadmium-free yellow medium, sap green, cadmium-free red light, crimson, vivid lime green, yellow ochre or yellow oxide, and burnt sienna. For our brushes, we have 2 small round tip brushes, 2 smaller flat tip brushes, and 1 like 1/2-inch filbert brush. We also have a cup of water for rinsing off our brushes and a couple napkins for cleaning up there. Miranda, hello, how's it going? And Fiona, how are you guys? All right, good. The chat's definitely working now, so that makes me feel better. But this is where we left off in part 1. We kind of finished up this background area. The sky's done. We have some trees in the foreground here that are gonna make their way into the scene from the top and sides. And then we started to block in shadows and highlights down here. I might do a little more with the water too, but we're gonna finish up this painting today. This is an 11-inch by 14-inch canvas panel using acrylic paint. All right, so today we're going to start with the leaves and stuff up here. And I'm just going to start by dipping my brush in the water just a little bit and taking some sap green. Sap green is pretty close to the color in the picture. And you know what? I'm going to hold on to that, use a smaller round tip, smaller flat tip brush, and we're going to take a little bit of water, a little bit of umber and blue. And now the paint's thinned down a little bit so we can get some little branches in here. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just make sure your branches don't come down all the way to where they cover up these hills or mountains here. We want to leave some space to show the clouds. And then up here we've got a little bit, just very lightly pressing the canvas with this brush. And I thin the paint down with some water. I'm going to scooch this back just a tiny bit there. All right, Miranda's got to go. Thanks for stopping by, Miranda. Okay. Getting a little more paint on the brush there, and we can start to add some tiny little branches kind of coming up. The lighter you press, the more narrow your line's going to be. The harder you press, the thicker your line's going to be for your branch. And don't make them all perfectly straight. They can bend a little bit, go in different directions. So now we know where we're going to have some leaves because we have the branches down. These are a few different species of tree here, but at least we have the branches so we know where the leaves can go. So first we've got like a maple here. We're just going to use some sap green. No blending needed for this color yet because it's just a pretty dark shady sap green color here, and I'm just doing little clusters of leaves Using my flat tip brush and kind of holding it at an angle, pressing and then lifting the brush, giving me those little mapley, pointy leaf edges. Just getting all these little leaves on here. Oop, a little bit of yellow leaked into there, that's okay. We'll mix a little bit of ultramarine blue in there too, and that'll darken this down a little bit. And you don't want to leave too much of your stems showing. You kind of want to cover up most of the stems with your leaves, especially at the bottom. But you can let parts of your stems still show through to let people know that these leaves are on a branch. And also another thing that a lot of people do is they try to like perfectly evenly space out these leaves. But if you do that, then it kind of takes away from how it would look in nature. So you can like put a little cluster here, a little cluster there. They don't all have to be perfectly spaced. And then we've got a little highlight in there, a little in some spots. So we're gonna take some yellow, just blend it in with the colors already there, and just add that in a couple spots. And that's gonna help to build that depth. And you could just take some ultramarine blue, blend it with that sap green, but it's more ultramarine blue than green. And you can put that in some spots too for really deep shadows. All right, that's looking good up there. Next, let's move over here. We've got a different type of tree that has some phthalo green in it. So I'm just blending my sap green with phthalo green. There's a little bit of that yellow got in there. And we'll take a little phthalo blue too. And this one is more like little dots, little clusters of dots. They're much smaller leaves. So I'm taking my angle brush and putting lots of little dots in here, keeping them like a dark, cool green color. You take more of your phthalo blue and your umber. Put more little dots in there. So we're using different colors and different brush strokes to make these look like two different types of trees. And then we can switch back to our smaller flat tip brush and take some yellow and some vivid lime green. And just put some little dots on here now. If you want to wait until your base color dries, you could do that, then you won't have any blending. I'm kind of just going and layering it over while the background color is still wet, because as the paint starts to run off my brush, it kind of blends in with the background color a little bit and Makes it feel like my light is kind of fading off of the leaves. Gives me a little more of a transition from highlight to shadow. All right, and then moving down, keep with that umber. We'll add a little ultramarine and that sienna or burnt umber color. Burnt umber, phthalo blue, and ultramarine blue. That is the combo here. And still just using the small brush. Starting to kind of push the brush around in different directions, create these little shadows in here. Autumn says, beautiful painting. Hi, Autumn. Thank you. All right, so we're building up those shadows. Now let's take some of our crimson with some burnt sienna, and I'm blending it a little bit into that darker color. We'll take a little umber in there too. And we'll start to add some little shadowy red leaves here. They kind of go up in front of these big leaves. Maybe they probably go behind it actually because they're smaller. It's hard to tell in the photo. A couple little guys there. Still want to leave some gaps in between these leaves so you can see a little bit of the sky behind there, and then the leaves get a little thicker as you come closer to the side of the canvas. There's a little bit less space for the sky to peek through over here. A little more crimson. And mix a little yellow in there too. And we'll just take some umber, straight umber, not blending anything. But there was a little red on my brush, so there might be a little red getting blended in here. All right, and then that red, actually let's move, yeah, we'll stick with the red. We'll take some of our cadmium-free red light, mix it with some crimson and a little bit of flesh tint. It's gonna give us a really pretty bright red. And we'll just start to add some highlights. You don't have to add a highlight on every single leaf. Again, there's going to be a cluster where there's more leaves together and spaces where there are less leaves. These leaves in here are mostly in shadow. Add a little more flesh tint there. And we'll add some more yellow because the leaves are a little more yellow down here. Very pretty. And let's take some crimson with a little sienna. And we'll just add like a little middle tone to some of these. So it's not like the brightest highlight. It's not the deep shadow either. If you feel like you overdid it with your highlights, then you can just let that layer dry and then start to add a little more shadow and then come back, add more highlights. Just keep layering and playing around with it until it looks really nice the way that you want it to look. And if you overdid it with your leaves totally, where you just like have no more sky space behind there, then all you need to do is re-blend the color that you made for your sky and just add some little dabs in there that would be the sky. So you're kind of layering it over top, but the color will match the sky, so you'll perceive it as that is sky. There. Okay. So let's see, now this is starting to dry a little more. Let's take some more of our yellow, some oxide or ochre, a little bit of that lime green, and some white. I want a nice bright highlight here. There we go. And we just put these random little spots here, kind of more highlighting towards this side and a little bit less on the right side. Got a couple kind of blended in here with the red ones too. Then I'm going to go back to my sap green real quick and just kind of cover up some of these reds to put these maple trees with the larger leaves kind of in front of the red ones. There we go. That looks better. Okay, and then we've got, I think this might be a pine tree here. We're going to take some of our phthalo green, sap green, yellow oxide, do a little more phthalo and some yellow. And a little more yellow. All right, looking good. And this one, got some highlights. I'm holding the brush very gently, kind of like teetering it like a seesaw, like doo-doo-doo, and balancing it and then letting the paint just kind of go on in little dabs. We're just layering this right in front of that red tree we had in here. Then we got to add a shadowy section. So I'm just going to mix my Umber with my Phthalo Green and add some shadows in there. And then just start to add some shadows under your highlight marks. A little bit of red got blended in there, that's okay. And let's just take some phthalo blue, a little black, and whoops, a little bit of green got in there. Phthalo green, black, and phthalo blue. Just put a really deep shadow in here. And carry it down a little bit. All right, now we can go back with that highlight color. Add a couple little highlights over top. It's okay if it blends a little bit in with your darker color, but you don't want it getting totally washed out and blended in. And if that starts to happen, then just let that layer of shadowy colors you just put down dry, and then you can go back with your highlights. All right, that's looking good. So let's see, there's a little bit more like sap green with our reds in here. Just gonna add a little more of that. And we'll take a little more yellow mix with our reds. Sometimes I just kind of blend around the colors that are already on my palette, and it kind of works. A little shadow there. And then I think I'm just gonna clean off that brush, take some white with a little flesh tint, tiny bit of black, and just add a little bit of a tree branch there and there. Touch that up a little bit. Can add your shadow over it if it stands out too much. All right. Good, so we got the top part mostly done now. Basically the top half of the painting is done. So we just gotta work on, where are we at with time? 23 minutes. So now we can work on the rocks down here, bring this part to life, and this will be a finished painting. All right, so the rocks are definitely the trickiest part of this painting, I'm not gonna lie. Let's switch to our flat tip brush that's a little bit bigger. Just cleaning that off really well. And let's see here. Let's start with, well, we got some people in the chat. Uni, Angel, hello, and Kath Burrito Art, hello. Welcome guys, thank you. We are going to use some phthalo blue with a little bit of white and a little ultramarine blue. Let's start with that color and see how that goes. All right. Maybe I want a little more ultramarine blue and a little crimson. Yeah, nice and dark. There we go. That's what we need. All right. Take a little phthalo green in there too. Now it's the right color. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're getting these little shadows in here where this water is really clear, and we can see some of the rocks and the little shadows and like the divots from where there are no rocks. And that's kind of what these shadows are here. So we're just gonna start putting these shadows in. It's pretty dark right in here. Just bear with me with these rocks, because these are kind of a tricky thing to paint realistically here, but I'm gonna try to teach it the best way that I can. Just get these little shapes in here. I'm just kind of pushing the brush back and forth. I'm seeing where there are some rocks in here, but I'm not really filling them in yet. I'm kind of making outlines of them with these shadows, but I'm not putting any highlights in yet. A little more phthalo blue. Mix a little brown in there. Maybe like a hint of white. Got these rocks right in here. A little shadow. And it gets more brown the closer we get here. Just mixing a little more crimson and umber in here. Kind of starting to outline shapes a little more. Got a few rocks in here. So a big rock right there. Hello, hi Michelle. How are you? Thanks for watching. What kind of paintings are you guys all working on? Or if you're working on a different craft, what are you working on? Oh, thank you. She said, congratulations on 5K subscribers. Thank you. A little more crimson in there. All right, so that's, we're getting the shadows pretty good in there. We'll get a little black and boost this shadow up too. This is a really dark shadow in this rock. A little shadow there. There's also a deep shadow behind that rock there. And let's take some phthalo with a little bit of that light blue violet, a little bit of crimson. IG Fine Art, hello, welcome. How's it going? And we've got a couple over here. I'm going to take some white and blend it into my shadowy color because we're getting farther away now, so these shadows aren't quite as dark over here. There's one or two that are still pretty dark, but in general, it's not as bad. Alrighty. Now let's take, oh, we've got a few more over here. Let me take a little phthalo again. And we'll just add a few in here. Let's take some phthalo and some aqua. And some phthalo green too. I'm getting a little bit more green, the shadows, as we move farther away from the slope, or farther away from the shore. As many of you know, sometimes when I'm painting, I forget how to talk. Got a shadow in there. And we just got a couple little shadows over here too. These are more from like the ripples on the water. Alrighty, now let's focus more on the rocks. So there's a lot going on here, and that's why I'm trying to break it down. There's first we have like all these rocks underwater, and then the water is moving, so it's creating all these little ripples of light all over these tiny little rocks. So each rock has like ripple streaks of highlight on them. So first we're gonna just get the base color for these little rocks, and then we'll start to add little highlights from the reflection of light on them. So we're kind of breaking it down. First we do the shadows, then we'll do the rocks, then we'll do the little highlights on the rocks, and then make some adjustments if something looks off. Watch and relax. Hello, how are you? They said awesome picture. I think it's almost ready. Yep, we're getting there. We're on the trickiest part of the painting right now. We're working on these rocks in the water. All right, so we're gonna take some ochre with some of our bright aqua green and some white. Can we see that on the camera? Yeah, we can, okay. And we're gonna take a little more ochre, maybe a tad of sienna, and get some of these guys here with that color. So see, that's pretty close to the color I had before, which is a good sign. That means my initial sketch was pretty spot on with the colors I was going for. And I'm just gonna fill in these shapes for the rocks again. Started to put some shapes in here, but I didn't get too detailed yet. I'm gonna take a little bit of, for some of the shadows, if we just put a little bit of our phthalo green and some umber in there, give us a little more of the shadowy sections of these rocks. And then some of them are way more on like the umber, way more on the warm side, so we need more, a little bit of umber, some flesh tint, and some more yellow oxide, or yellow ochre. And those rocks are either more shallow or they're way more red than the other ones. Got a blue one over here. Make some more of my shadows in. Trying not to leave too large of a gap for my shadows. I want there to be just little gaps. Let's see here. Tinker Quinn. Why Winton instead of artist? I'm new here and learning, haven't bought paint yet, and learning as much as I can before buying some. Have experience with acrylic, just not oil. Okay, nice. Welcome. I like to use these Liquitex soft-bodied paints here. When I use, are you asking about oil paint, Winton? Why using Winton instead of, what's the artist brand? Is that like the one from Michaels? There are a lot of different brands of oil paint. I can show you real quick. I use the Winton oil color for a lot of my paint colors, but I prefer other brands for other paint colors too. Basically the cost difference with the oil paints like this, the Winton is a pretty cheaper, not cheap, but it's more budget friendly oil paint than, oh, this one's artist oil color. Is that what you're asking? This is a brand. This one's more expensive than this one. And then I've got, what else do we have here? Oh yeah, you're asking Winton versus the artist oil color all by Winsor & Newton. I get what you're asking now. There we go. Yes, so for the Winton paints, these are more budget friendly. Basically the difference between Winton and the artist oil color by Winsor & Newton is the amount of base in the paint. So the Winton paints are less expensive because they have a little bit more of that filler base, and the artist oil color have more pigment in them. So that's why the artist oil color are more expensive, because they have more of the actual pigment. So the color is slightly richer. These guys have a little bit more of that filler material and a little bit less pigment. So they're like the consistency isn't too different from my experience, but these guys have a little bit more pigment in them. So professionals use artist oil color, and people that are still practicing as hobbyists, or you could be professional, you just don't, you know, this isn't like, I don't use this for everything, is the Wint and oil colors. Hopefully that helps. All right, back to this painting. All right, so let's go back to these little shadows in here. I'm going to mix a little bit more burnt sienna, and we'll get a little bit of yellow and some of our cadmium-free red light. Yep, no problem, Tinker. And just put a little bit of those in there. And then on this guy, we've got a little highlight. I'm going to take a little more white. This rock is out of the water partially. So that one's nice and bright. Doesn't have any blue or turquoise in it. This rock is a similar color. Nice and bright. And this rock right here, similar color out of the water. Same with this guy. Partially out of the water. And before I get too caught up on the rocks out of the water, let's go back to the ones underwater. Let's take a little more of our darker blues with the crimson. Let's add a little bit of our purple shadows, maybe a little black in there too. Building up those shadows some more. All right, let's take more of our bright aqua green color. Actually, let me clean off my brush. It's getting a little muddy. Bright aqua green and some ultramarine blue. Yep, that's what we want. And maybe let's take a little bit of flesh tint and start to add. Yeah, let's add a little white in there too. Maybe a little bit more of that green. And start to add little highlights in here where we've got some rocks visible. Mixing a little bit of my purple, and let's mix a little bit of sienna in there too. Let's get a little bit of that there. A little bit of phthalo brown in here. There's just a little bit of that rock showing. And then we want to keep this light color in here where we can add like a little bit of the yellow and ochre colors, but not too much. And we'll take more of just that aqua color. Start to add some more little highlights in here. And you can kind of like just push the paint around a little bit. Things are starting to get out of focus because we can see more of like the ripples of water than like the individual rocks here. So you can just take your brush once you put these little things down and just kind of push it around a little, and then you can add a little bit more of the shadows in there, but you want to keep it a little looser over here. Don't quite see the each individual rock like we do over here. All right, so that's starting to fade out there. We'll take more of our aqua green with a little white. And yeah, that's pretty good. Tinker says the trees in the foreground look incredible. Thank you very much. Nice. Hopefully we'll get the water looking like that too here in a bit. Just adding some highlights for the ripples And you can add a couple little shapes in here for some of the little rocks under there. Can't really see them all. Got to do a lot of color blending to get the right colors for all these different rocks under here. Let's take a little more Phthalo Green. Can add a little highlight. Mix a little white in there. It's a little bright. Got this rock in here, it's pretty close to the surface. That one's lighter. I've got like the green below that. All right, we've got some crimson with light blue, violet, and ultramarine, a little flesh tint. Got like a purpley color on this rock under the water. Where else do we have some purple in here? There's a little purple in this rock. A little purple in here. Got lots of colors going on. And then we've got a little bit of that other color on top of that rock too. A little bit more of the ochre color here. And then it kind of fades into the dark phthalo green with some ultramarine and some crimson. Just like a really dark shadow right there. Take even more crimson. Yeah, take a little black. Most importantly, just make sure you don't leave any white space down here. You want to have everything filled with your colors for your rocks. You can start to add some brown, some umber, mixed with a little bit of flesh tint and a little bit of blue is getting in there too. Let's make some sienna. Just doing lots of mixing. And now we can do some little shadows on the bottoms of these rocks. They're kind of like vertical little lines. And let's see right here, I need some of that. I'm going to take some of my oxide, kind of blend that in to these colors here. I'm just picking the brush up as I'm sweeping it across. Then we'll mix some oxide with our sienna. That'll give us more of the wet rock look here. Bring a little bit of that down under the water. And let's see what else. We got a little bit of a shadow at the top of this wet section there. And then there's like a nice little white highlight here, right where the water touches this rock. I'm just gonna picken that up there with the brush. All right, we can touch this one up too. Let's take some more of our sienna and some yellow. And we'll just a little more flesh tint. Oh, that was a little too much. Take more of our oxide. There we go. And we'll add more of our shadow on this side of the rock. There we go. Okay, a little more sienna on this rock down here. And maybe a little bit in there. A little bit on that rock. But you're getting the idea that these are starting to look like they're underwater. And we'll take some more white. There's a little bit of ochre over in this spot too, so I'm getting a nice highlight here. And we're just outlining this rock to have a nice sharp edge. And we've got like some crimson with a little bit of black, a little ultramarine on this side of the rock. It's kind of coming down. And we'll take our highlight color again, put this here. Let's get a nice good shape. All right, that rock's looking pretty good. We'll take a little more white. Just touch that up. And I'll take a little bit more of my ochre. Put a little ochre line for the edge of that rock that's going under the water. Just so we know this is all one rock there. And now let's add some of our little highlights down here. So we have white with some of our bright aqua green and some of our oxide color. It's really nice and bright. And this one, we just have these little squiggles. It's going to be easier to do with a smaller brush. Let's take the smaller brush and just start to add a couple little highlights on these rocks. Kind of just squiggly little lines right on each top of each rock. You don't want the highlights to extend like all the way to the shadowy parts. You only want it at the top of the rocks. And I could touch that one up a little bit later. Take a little more aqua as we're getting farther out. You can dip your brush in the water a little if you want to thin that paint down and have it be a little bit less opaque. Just start to add all these little squigglies, highlights all over the place. Eventually it's going to be pure bright aqua green with a little bit of white. And eventually it turns into like ripples on top of the water too. Kind of following these little waves. They're going back and forth, kind of not perpendicular, but not parallel. So you have your little shadowy waves coming this way, and then you have these little highlights kind of coming this way in lines. Back to our little highlights on the water here, on the rocks in the water. Gotta add a few more little shadows over here, so I'm gonna take some more phthalo with a little bit of crimson and phthalo green. Let's add a little more crimson, make it more purple. All right, and we'll take some of our aqua green with some phthalo and some phthalo green. And I just want to add some more of these ripples on top of the water here. Can dip the brush in the water, do a couple more, just quickly going back and forth here. They kind of fade off into the colors. If you have a liner brush, you can get an even more defined line for these ripples. Let's put a little crimson in there. And we could take a little more phthalo green. And let's take some aqua in there too. Just start to add little middle tones. I'm trying to get like a nice transition between what, like the visible part and the part where we can't really see what's under the water anymore. So I'm going to cover up little bits of this with the color here. Let's take a little bit of this color. Just add a couple little ripples over the water. Let's take some more white and light blue violet. Gonna switch back to my bigger brush. And we'll take some light blue violet and some aqua green and just touch this up a little here. Lightening up this section. More light blue violet. Getting some of the colors in the sky here. And then it kind of transitions into this aqua green color. Just very gently pressing on the canvas. Mixing a little phthalo blue and phthalo green in there too. And going back to our highlight with that bright aqua green. Just kind of carrying that around with my flat tip brush. And it transitions more into that purple color. So I'm just going to blend what's on my palette already. Start to add that in here. And just a little bit of purple. I think that's looking pretty good. Let's take a little more of our Phthalo Green and Phthalo Blue. And we'll darken this up over here. Let's take a little sap green in here too, because we've got a reflection from this tree area here. And we got a little more highlight. Yeah, highlight's got more of that aqua color. Just very lightly pressing, going back and forth. There, how's the water look? It's looking pretty good. All right, let's move. Let's just do a teeny tad bit more, and then we'll move on to the rest of the painting. Just gonna add another little shadow in here. Build the shadows up one more time. One more Phthalo Green. All right, got a little more oxide and crimson over here. And we just gotta add some shadows for those. All right, looking good. Switch to our round tip brush and let's get some oxide with flesh tints and white. Just boost the highlight on this rock, and this rock. This rock's got like a purple, part of it's underwater. And I'll take some white. All right, good. Now we can tell that one's going underwater. Let me touch up this rock again to show this is in the foreground. And we'll take some umber with some flesh tint. A little more umber. Get a shadowy part to this rock. And then there's just like some white with the umber and stuff that's on your brush. And we'll touch up this rock here. Make sure you get a nice sharp edge on your rocks. Don't want to have like a fuzzy edge. Taking a little more burnt sienna. Ooh, that was a little too much. Take some yellow. And we'll just add a little highlight where the water line is there. Touch up the water line on that one. Okay, and then this rock is pretty light. Here I just kind of start to blend the colors that are on my palette already, because I'm kind of running out of space for blending. Can just create some new colors. A little more white there. And we'll take some sienna with some umber. Get the shadowy side of this rock. Mix a little black in there. And there's like a little weird shadow right here. Maybe it's like lichen or something, I don't know. There we go. Petro, hello, welcome. How are you? Dun, dun, dun. Let's move back to this rock. It's blending some white with the like browns and grays already on there. There is a fallen stick on this rock, and I am not going to include that because that's gonna... I don't really want to include it. Mixing some more black in here. Need some black and some umber. Dark shadow on the back here. And this one's got like a dark shadow in the front. I'm going to mix a little bit of Ultramarine Blue here too. And we'll take some sienna for the part that's underwater. Take some umber, just touch up the back of this guy. All right, looking good. Mixing our yellows, red, and we'll just add another rock like right in here. And take some of my brown. Keep the bottom in shadow. Add a shadow on the back of it there. And we've got another bright rock, mixing a little flesh tint. with some sienna and yellow. This one's like right here. And we've got some umber on the back of this one. Just adding a highlight. Gonna boost this highlight on this one again. Same with these back here. Mixing some yellow and some burnt sienna for the base here. This rock's got like a little bit of yellow. Well, I got my shadows on this rock. And take some white. Add some highlights here. For these rocks. And let's mix a little bit of our bright aqua green and a little ultramarine blue in with some flesh tint for some of the shadows on these rocks. Let's give it a little bit of a cooler feel. I'm not painting these rocks exactly like they are in the reference photo. The very front foreground here is going to be a little different too. I'm going to make it more like grass. Right now in my reference photo it looks more like a bunch of little bushes. Get a little more of our burnt sienna for this wet part of these rocks. Kind of fades into like a blue-purple color. And I'll take some burnt umber for the background, for the shadows. All right, take some more white. Some umber. Kind of blend these in here. Just adjusting the shapes a little and the shadows. All right, that looks better. Okay, let's just get this one last little rock in here. Got a shadow there, and takes a little bit of black. And we'll take some ultramarine or some phthalo blue with some sap green, and we can take our flat tip brush, the not smallest one, second to small one, and we're just going to do some grasses, and that'll be the end of this painting. Just going back and forth, very gently pressing. It's blending a little bit with the highlights and the rocks, but that's okay because there's should be some highlights on this side of the grasses anyway. And a few more little shadows. And some highlights. We'll take some yellow, some vivid lime green. And do a little phthalo green and some cadmium red. And just add some highlights. Don't have to add highlights to every single blade of grass. It's mostly going to be more at the tops. Then there's just this rock in here. Little rock right there. Let's take a little ultramarine blue. Blend that in for a shadow. And some umber and black. You can take a little umber with blue and add a little bit of dirt if you want some dirt to be visible. But that's basically it, guys. Let me see how that looks from far away. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, so we'll call that a finished painting for the purposes of this video. I have a couple little things I want to tweak, but that's basically it. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this painting tutorial. This is Jordan Pond in Acadia National Park. We visited here in September of 2020, so the autumn leaves were just starting to come into the scene here, filling it with color. If you would like to make this more colorful, you can do that. I might make it a little more colorful there. We'll see. But that's a finished painting. Ta-da! Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day and happy painting. Bye-bye.